is a lot. Oh.
Like, I want to do it. Yeah.
The other thing is, it was a little bit of a match. You guys have and so does the city. I was a banker, but I was the guy that moved the checks. I didn't do anything.
We're going to call you ex officio.
That's why we did.
Gotcha. No, it's worked out. Yeah. Hopefully we can get somebody on.
It's like 5 minutes walking from all the residential, very end of the residential to it. Runs every minute and a half.
Somebody.
Every time I'm like, he was a good one. 24/7? He's like on this side of town. He's like, all right. I was like,
Oh, that's perfect. Well, I'm glad there's a whole crowd. I was like, I don't know. Because obviously we had some really vocal people in the first one, but like, you can't ask the same questions. So like, maybe they'll come to sit. Oh, that was a lot. Yeah. It was a lot. Yeah.
I'm on the downside of, this is a pretty good day.
Yeah.
Kilometers outside the city.
Good evening. Time being shortly after 7 o'clock, I'll call the February 12th Joint Budget Subcommittee meeting to order. Please pause for a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming this evening. This is the second of our 6 listening sessions where we're trying to get as much input and answer as many questions for the community as we can. And I just want to lead off with a few words to set the expectations and goals for tonight's meeting. As you're all aware, we started this joint budget subcommittee task on September 11th from square one. I thought it was very important we walked through the budget process together and collectively and move through the budget process together and collectively. The budget cycle, all on the same page with the professional staff. The goal for tonight's meeting will be for everyone throughout the community to continue to gain perspective into the budget development system that our town and school staff work within. I'm hopeful this approach continues to enlighten and educate those who are interested in making the best community decisions possible as we move forward. As I'm sure everyone will understand, patience, focus, and positivity must be elements we're all committed to as this process continues to unfold. So with that, we'll get right into the town administrator's FY26 budget update. Jamie.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chairman, through the board, out to the folks at home, I know we're live streaming right now as well. For those of you that attended the last meeting, this will be the same kind of opening update that I gave at the last meeting. For those of you watching at home or anybody in the cafetorium, you can go on to franklinma.gov, onto tonight's agenda, onto the joint budget onto the budget page for FY26. Everything I'm reading is there. As a cheap plug, on the town website, on the budget page, if you go to FY26 budget, which is the year we're in, you will actually see a one-stop shop for all of the materials that Chair Mercer just spoke to. We have on there also all the most up-to-date school materials, and the town is trying to make sure that everything that the community needs to know in the budget is all in one place. As materials continue to change, we are going to upload them all there. So bookmark the page. That'll be your one-stop shop. The update I'm going to give was just given also a couple weeks ago at our first session, and this will also be the update I'll be giving at the next couple. Just to put it out there for the audience in the room and watching at home, the next update that you'll see with revised numbers will be at the March 5th, or I anticipate at the March 5th Town Council meeting. Just again, while people are alert and paying attention to me, March 5th and March 19th are the 2 town council meetings where there will be public discussions around the budget. There will be revised numbers. For those of you that have watched this before, many of you on this board that have been through budget debates for many years, know usually I put out a preliminary budget right around that beginning of March. And then again, I file by town charter the actual formal town administrator budget later in April. So it does take my staff and myself a solid 5, 6, 7 weeks to really put all the materials together. So there is a little bit of a gap between when I put out the preliminary model and when I actually file the budget. But so for the materials that were over here, it looks like a lot of people got a copy. To open up on page 1, the short and sweet of it is, right now we're looking at a 3.6, 3.7. The number on the page is 3.6 million, but it'll be within that mid 3 million range, maybe a little bit higher, 3.7, 3.8, 3.5. There are going to be updated numbers on a variety of things by then, but I anticipate the 3.6 number being quite strong. or quite accurate, excuse me. The revised assumptions, for those of you that have been following through September, October, November, December, back to last June, the reason why we don't talk about the budget a lot in the fall, and this is every city or town in Massachusetts, is because the baseline for all budgets across the state are really with the baseline of what the governor puts out in what you call House 1, which is the governor's proposed budget. One thing I want to point out to those folks that are affiliated with the schools, there's always a press release that goes out saying this administration has filed the budget with the most per pupil dollar figure, the highest Chapter 70 amount ever. We commend the governor and the Healy-Driscoll administration for doing that again. It's at $75 per pupil. That is excellent for Chapter 70. The problem is that you can't just look at the one number of Chapter 70 and say, oh, we've got an extra $300,000 or whatever in money. There are also assessments throughout the entire Chapter 70 formula, as well as other areas in our town budget, and it's on what we call a cherry sheet. The cherry sheet is what every finance director, school business administrator in Massachusetts look at as what their foundation and what the basis of their budget is going to be for the following fiscal year. All of us on the local level joke, we can't wait for the cherry sheets to come out. That's what we talk about for weeks. Usually this is announced at the third week in January each year at the Mass Municipal Conference in Boston. So if you look at the entire formula on state aid, the good news is that the net result of the governor's proposal is $272,024 above where we had projected local aid would be in December earlier this fall, okay? So I'm not looking at that over FY25, I'm just walking the community through, as Chair Mercer said, through this year looking to FY26. So we saw a net increase of $272,000. The assessments against the community were far less than what we anticipated. We had projected local aid at 1.5%, and it came in at 1.23%. The main driver there is generally around charter school enrollment and also tri-county enrollment, and also a few other accounts that deal nothing with schools, that deal with local aid, like UGA, unrestricted general government aid, and a variety of other accounts. If anybody's interested in getting really geeky into the cherry sheets, just Google Department of Revenue Massachusetts cherry sheets, and you can go wild. You can download all 351 municipalities, all their Excel spreadsheets, and have fun. The second revenue source that has changed since the fall is a testament to our local municipal staff. Local receipts, I am upping the assumption $1 million, which takes that deficit from earlier this fall down. For those of you that don't know what local receipts are, you can read the memo, but generally, a lot of that is motor vehicle excise tax, but that's also meals tax, cannabis excise tax, hotel tax, recreation receipts, alcohol licensing, permitting fees on the municipal side. That's also the revenues that the town clerk brings in on vitals, marriage certificates, all of those revenues from the Board of Health, the Planning Department, the DPW, all of those revenues go into one pot. Local receipts is the municipal equivalent of revolving funds for the schools. And as I've explained many times recently, go back and watch the videos, the revolving funds for the schools are under the control of the school committee. They do not need town council or town meeting approval. And those figures are then reported to the Department of Education every year, whereas on the town side, we actually have to go toward the Department of Revenue. So there's two state agencies that deal with this. I'm sorry if I'm repetitive a little bit, but I know there's some new faces in the audience, and I know there's some folks watching at home, so I'm gonna do the best I can. We've also downgraded new growth, just a slight amount, back to 1.1 million. We downgraded that revenue source by 71,000. I've laid out many of the reasons here in the memo. You can read all of the budget narratives that I've written in the past several years. Pre-pandemic, our new growth number every year was 1.8, 1.9 million. So over the last several years, as interest rates have risen, homeowners, commercial development has dried up. I understand that many people feel like the town is growing a lot, but it's actually not. And also because people are doing less renovations on their homes, residential properties, commercial properties because of market conditions. we've leveled that number out. We've come back down to earth, and the 1.1 million is what our assumption will be. We've also revised the healthcare numbers. We do have some outstanding pieces that we have to still fill in, but generally that healthcare number is about 14.5%. And if you look at any article that's in the newspaper these days, you'll see that 14.5% is easily within range of what we're seeing in both the private and public sectors. The GIC also has gone way up for the Group Insurance Commission. So you will see that number go up a little bit in the next few weeks, but right here we've laid it out. And one positive in this that I know the superintendent and I have talked and coordinated on a lot, we were at a 68-32 employee split for many, many years, and a lot of our employee members, including the teachers as well, have really tried to advocate strongly for a 70-30 split, and this proposal does get us to that 70-30 split. It may not seem like a big deal, but I can assure you from our comparables in the region, that 70-30 split is actually a much bigger deal than the actually percentage of 2% that it is. So we have not had any plan design changes really in 4 years. Since the pandemic, all of our unions and employees have tried to prioritize stability, consistency, and this is actually one tweak as we're looking at the health insurance market that we're trying to reshuffle things for the next several years. And that was one thing that I know both Lucas and I have talked about, and our HR directors. This is a big priority of mine. I've heard about it for a long time, and we're really happy to be able to have that in this budget model. The last thing I'll mention on the budget model is all the departmental requests are in here. This model does include the $80.4 million that was approved last night at the school committee. And this model had come out a couple weeks ago, but we'd had that all baked out. This also does include the police department, the fire department, DPW, public property and buildings, the library. I put in here what I call the big six, which I define as any budget that's $1 million or more. And so those numbers are in here. You can see the total dollar value. It also showcases the issue between percentages and dollars. So if you look at this, you see the Franklin Public Library went up 5.5%. And somebody can say, whoa, but it's really a quantity of dollars of 63%. And as many people who watch my budget meetings know, I don't like percentages at all. 63,810. I don't like percentages a lot of times because they're very misleading. It's very, very important for people to not look at the percentages. It is very important to look at the total dollars. Because at the end of the day, you only have so many dollars like your household coming into your house each year. That pie, when you look at percentages, additionally, the superintendent's budget and our budget, oftentimes we're moving things around to do mini reforms. Last year we did the procurement office, and you'll see when we create a new one-person department, that may be 1,000% change, but it was really just moving from one department to another. Conservation was also like that. Percentages are very misleading. The total dollars are what are important. The last couple updates on here also highlight the redistricting savings for the town. Those savings are not in this budget model. We have kept those savings in the facilities department because, as many people may recall, as part of the override last year, and I know this has been a discussion at many of the budget meetings, we have, the facilities department has never really fully recouped from the pandemic, mainly from inflation 3 years ago, where electricity rates, utilities skyrocketed. Go back and read my budget memos and narratives from a couple years ago. You'll see those huge increases in there. By the way, just so folks know, that may be in my budget, but an overwhelming amount of that money that would be in savings would stabilize the facilities budget, which, just so folks know, out of the 1.3 million square feet of space in town, of building space that the town manages, 1 million of that 1.3 are school facilities. So the majority of that money that would be in there from those savings, we're trying to kind of call it a wash so that we can reinvest in fixing up, plumbing issues or doors or a whole variety of little tweaks and things that need to get fixed in our school buildings. So those savings are not represented in that structural deficit. After all that, you come out to a $3.637 million structural budget deficit. And just because I've received the question many times recently, that is a structural deficit that is not resolved. It is going to take some combination of whatever the community decides to fix that deficit, or by the time we get to my filing of my budget in April, and then the hearings at the FinCom in April and May, and then the council meetings in May, we're either gonna have to cut, find one-time revenues, or raise those revenues through some other mechanism. So, that's my update, Mr. Chairman, about the best I can do in about 10 or 15 minutes.
That was 9, but good job.
All right, I'll take it.
Thanks, Jamie. Superintendent Jagger.
Yes, I'll start the timer now, okay. No,
Good.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lucas Jagger, Superintendent of Schools. Just wanted to point out a few things. Jamie did reference, last night, the school committee approved the recommended budget that we put forth last night for the 80.4 million, which is a 3.78% increase over last year. You talked a little bit about reorganization on the town side, on the school side. We are unifying 3 middle schools under one roof, and we are having 2 elementary complexes and repurposing 2 of our middle school elementary complexes within town and expanding our ECDC program, which is our early childhood, which is now outgrown its space, and we need to move into an additional space within the town on Pond Street. So those are some pieces there. Through some strategic reallocation of our resources and redistribution of our positions, we were able to reduce 20 FTEs in this budget as we look to reset our foundation for how we will operate to carry forward schools. Within that, this is all predicated, that budget and that request is based on still needing to solve a $3.6 million deficit. So I just think it's important to note, we needed to strike a balance between being fiscally responsible, right-sizing the district, putting the right positions in place to support our schools. But I would like to also point out that what we advocated for is still part of what we know to be a $3.6 million deficit. So just wanted to clear, because I get the same questions, Jamie, and it was around, this number is all based on us solving the structural deficit that we have, that right now is hovering around 3.6, give or take, one way or the other. The last thing I would just mention was our line by line in our budgets. You talked about percentages and how those can get a little wild. If you look at our budgets, we've basically rebuilt our school budgets because now we are organized differently. So you'll notice that we made some shifts aligning with the DESI account codes, for example, and shifting some things. So for this year, it's not a rinse and repeat of schools as we knew them with 3 middle schools. Now you have 1 middle school. So you'll notice if you go to our line by line, or if you watch that segment of the budget hearings, you can see, and we did leave some notes on the right-hand side of the column to make sense of where there were some larger shifts, just to help inform the community and the public. And if you want to watch that, you can see some of the questions that were asked from the committee and from the public as well. We are working together to try to really work on getting our information sooner. Typically, schools have provided budget information. Last year, I presented on March 13th, I believe, for the recommendation, and we've moved that up in an effort to try to have as much information as possible for our community so that decisions could be made that help us really try to move forward and try to solve what we know is that shared structural deficit that we need to resolve. So my hope is that we can continue to work together, use the information we have to reset and build, and then continue to try to build as we move forward into the future. But before we can do that, we really have to focus on the here and now and really trying to work on step 1 is really working to resolve that. So that was just part of the efforts that we made while we were still trying to work through the redistricting and the reorganization. And thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Okay, we're here also to listen and to hopefully answer some of our residents' questions as to how the budget was built, why it was built in the way it was, and what your tax dollars are being spent on. So I'm going to open it up now to questions from our residents that are here tonight. Please, don't everybody come up at once, but I'm sure there's questions out there. And thank you for being number
the
one.
ice.
If you just name and address, please.
Celia Courtwright, 213 Peck Street. I've got a couple of questions here. So I looked through the school budget. I didn't have a chance to watch the replay yet of last night's school committee, so I apologize if this was covered there. but I know that with the level service, you talked about bringing back about 8 positions, and I'm president of the Music Boosters, very dear to my heart, is bringing back the middle school orchestra. I saw that was listed, but, you know, the rest of fine arts were also pretty heavily impacted. I assume theater is not included in this budget?
So theater was offered at the high school as a course that students could request. What I want to be really clear about, and maybe this is an opportunity to do that, there's 2 things at play. Sometimes there are budget decisions made that in a healthy budget, we wouldn't normally cut, but we have to. So then we look at, do we cut this class that has 25 kids or this class? And that's when you get into those smaller class sizes, and then you have to make decisions when you're forced to do what we had to do in the spring. There are other times where they are enrollment-based, or they're enrollment-driven, and we have to figure out how are we going to prioritize our resources. So with theater, it's about the students, and I think one thing that I think will be helpful for our community, I've already talked to Dr. Weber, as we go through the course selection process, just to be really clear about things running and not running and why. I think it would be really helpful for our community as we move forward. So if students are taking and requesting to take a class, such as theater, and we have the sections to support it, and we have an FTE or a teacher who can teach it, we would run a course that students are looking to have. If we're in a tight budget situation, and right now, we built a budget that hasn't solved a $3.6 million deficit, but we still put our best foot forward to include some of the restored cuts that we know we experienced over the summer. So as we do that, what I plan to do is provide information so that we don't have misinformation out there around things cut, and I don't want to have a budget decision looked at as an enrollment decision and vice versa, an enrollment decision looked at as a budget decision. So at this point, the students had the opportunity to select those courses, and we will see where the budget shakes out, and we'll go from there.
So if enough kids were, say 30 kids signed up and said they wanted to take theater, you would be trying to find someone to teach theater within the budget?
Yes, and I don't want to overspeak, but the idea is we would look at the number of sections that we have, the number of requests, and then build a master schedule at the high school that accounts for the courses kids are taking. And that's typically what we do every year. I just think when we've been experiencing budget cuts and fluctuations, I think there's been a lot of impacts on students that I think are real. But I think the best thing we could do is just provide that clarity as we move through that process. So I don't have the answer today because they're still in the process of determining which courses will run, and that's really done at the high school level with the leadership team that exists there.
And on a mostly non-elective one, there's another couple of other classes where I know has been difficulty finding teachers to teach it. I've heard like an Algebra 2 class didn't have a teacher for months this year. Is the budget a factor in being able to bring in a high school math teacher? I mean, Algebra 2 isn't, that's a class I believe almost every single kid who goes to the high school takes. So this isn't a matter of not having kids wanting to take the class.
So I'll say, without getting into specifics around the reason there are vacancies, there's a host of reasons why that can be the case. When we start the year, we field the team, we hire the appropriate adults that we need and the educators we need to teach those classes. It could be a situation where we haven't had a filled position. It could be a leave. It could be a host of reasons why a class wouldn't. But I can tell you that we're committed to making sure that we're bringing in the educators that are licensed and are ready to teach our students in any given particular area. I think about recruitment. You know, one of the things that we've talked about is, I think, creating stability and looking at optimizing. Right now, we're in a really unique year with our reorganization and trying to land the plane, but ultimately trying to make sure that we have all of the right educators in the right seats to teach our kids. The only other thing I would mention is, as part of recruitment and retention, we are exploring the option of staff childcare as a way to prioritize and work that as one of the options that we could offer as well, as just a caveat or a recruitment tool to try to help us continue to recruit and retain teachers as one example. But we look to hire. If there is some sort of mid-year shift, those are typically more difficult to fill, because once the cycle of the school year starts, teachers aren't typically leaving mid-year to go take other positions. but we do our best to do that, so.
And I have one last question, which is for both the schools and the municipal. As we can see with a lot of the things going on, people are, upset with like management level decisions and things like that. And I think it would be good to explain a little bit what the administration level does. Why do we need a town administrator and an assistant town administrator? What are the administrators a little bit in the schools beyond just like the superintendent? Because I know that we are, from having looked at the numbers, that it's staffed relatively appropriately by ratios and things like that. But I think people don't know what administration means and basically why we need administrators, I guess is what I'd say.
I'll start, Jamie, if you want. So, I put a slide up last year, I think, in one of our budget presentations. We can try to find it. Just around comparables, like where do we compare within the state averages? I won't speak for you, Jamie, but I'll just speak in general. The question, why do we need administrators? There's a lot of functions that happen throughout a district, an organization, a town, in just insert any organization where there are decisions that we have to lead. When we think about our assistant superintendents and some of those key level positions, we're an academic institution. So for us, there's teaching and learning that needs to be overseen and led, and support to build out for professional development for teachers, to go through our hiring process, residency, special education, student services, counseling, all the areas of our school that teachers are interacting with kids. They're all aligned to a department, a role, or some facet of that work. So we work to try to work through applying for grants. We do a lot of work at the central office, the HR department. We have a fairly small HR department for 1,200 employees. It's made up of 3 people that are working to try to hire. Unfortunately, sometimes the other side of hiring and firing and all of the things in between that we work towards. So the positions that we have, I feel as though we've really worked hard to try to have systems in place that allow different people beyond just the superintendent. You need a superintendent by state law, but that's not the reason. I think I wouldn't say it's a compliance thing. I think you need someone in this seat, whether it's me or somebody else, to lead some of the work and sit here tonight, and do these things. So I'll start there, and you can feel free to fill in.
Yeah, I'd echo, obviously a lot of what Lucas said. First, by town charter, I serve as the chief executive officer for the community, and so my role is to do just about everything, or at least manage just about everything. We have about 24 town departments. It's far from just police and fire and DPW. When you go down the list, we have the conservation department, we have the purchasing department, we have the finance department, we have the human resources department, we have the animal control department. I mean, I could go on and on. If people really look into the budget, especially in FY25, and you go to the first appendix, I would encourage people to just spend an afternoon or an hour just scanning through all the departments that we have. And hopefully folks can get an appreciation for the level of depth and diversity that we have in all the departments that are there, and the myriad of topics that I in particular deal with. We also, as town administrator, there's also other things I do that no one knows about. For example, I'm the chairman of the Regional Dispatch Board. We have a regional district with dispatch that we've had for 6 years. By that charter of that dispatch center, each town manager in that district has a seat on the board of directors. We have monthly meetings. I mean, I'm not gonna sit up here and give everybody a 45-minute lecture on exactly everything I do. But all of that just contributes to an enormous amount of time. Lucas and I both, by contract, roughly, are probably working supposed to be 35 or 40 hours. None of us are delusional to think that that's what the job is when we take it. But when you look at comparable communities, Millis, Needham, Natick, Medway, Norfolk, Rentham has, all of the communities have assistant town managers. If you look at communities our size, like the Needhams, the Naticks, all the Norwoods, Needham and Norwood have 2 assistant town managers in their community. I'm not going to speak for my predecessor, Mr. Nutting, but I am going to say what he has said many times publicly, as well as Privately, I know to many people, one of the worst decisions he ever made when he was town administrator for 15 years was never hiring an assistant town manager. And there's a lot of also work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of coordinating packets, doing all of the work that you get ready for, the volume of emails, the communications we deal with. Oftentimes, if I'm at a board of directors meeting for a regional dispatch, the deputy town administrator is going to be the #1 person that's going to go respond to an emergency, deal with customers that come in the door, respond to people who want things right away. There's been also a growth in service requests in town from arts and culture, economic development. In our case, Amy deals with a lot of those issues. She's organized all of our social services. There was a big need for social service coordination in town. That was a big priority of the town councils. I can't do everything. It's just a volume capacity. You look at Millis, you look at Rentham, you look at smaller communities a third the size of ours. The town of Southborough, there's so many communities pretty much all over the place. Unless you're like a town of 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, or 3,000, all of those communities have an assistant town manager. Norfolk has one. Norfolk's had one for decades. And so, I can't overspeak the importance of the assistant town manager role. And also, as Jeff always reminds me, having a peer, and I know Lucas feels the same way in this for sure, but having somebody who understands what you go through, having a peer there, having somebody that you can talk to at a high-level professional level about strategy, about how to get through these budget issues, as many other things in the community, it's absolutely integral to have assistant superintendents and assistant town managers. And I know I speak for Lucas on this. I mean, we virtually coordinate everything throughout the entire community on behalf of the town council, who directs me and Amy and the town staff, and also the school committee, who directs Lucas and Paula and Tina and his entire team as well. I hope that gives a little bit of an overview.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Lucas.
Yep.
Brian?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, I just wanted to say, you heard from the people that are, is that not working? Okay. You just heard from the people that have hired their people in the central office and at the town hall on the 3rd floor. Now, I've been following town government for over 30 years, and I have to really say, at the beginning, as a taxpayer, I wondered why we needed 2 assistant superintendents when Lucas handled it all by himself. But going through the budget the way we go through it, Ms. Rogers and Ms. Marino, they do incredible work, amounts of work that one person could not do. Those jobs are needed. And now lastly, our assistant town administrator, Ms. Amy Frigiletti.
Nice dodge.
Amy. The things that she's doing now that weren't getting done, no offense to Jamie, because he had everything on his plate, but she is doing incredible work. So as someone that's looked at the budget and can say to the residents, we're not wasting money on those 3 jobs right now. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Brian. Please, come forward. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Evans, 174 Oak Street.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Some of you are going to hear the similar thing that I said yesterday, but I'm hoping that maybe this reaches a wider audience. Maybe some different people are listening tonight. So not only am I a resident, 15-year resident here of Franklin, but 22-year veteran teacher. I'm a teacher at Franklin Public Schools. I'm the World Language Director. I've been the director here for 12 years. So I am gonna read from this a little bit, so I get all my points in. So I'm here tonight to advocate for increased funding for our schools and to urge our town council and finance committee to put an operational override forward to a vote. One that will sustain and protect critical programs like world languages, and to emphasize the profound impact that ongoing budgetary constraints have had on the quality of our world language programming, and more importantly, on the educational opportunities for our students in Franklin. Our schools are at a breaking point. Without additional funding, we continue to lose fundamental programs that set up our students for success, not just in world languages, but also in music, the performing arts, and other essential disciplines. Many of our gifted world language students are also amongst our most talented musicians, and these programs play critical roles in fostering creativity, discipline, and academic achievement. But with a budget stretched so thin, our school leaders, bless them, are forced to prioritize mandated expenses, leaving little room to invest in the very programs that enrich the lives of our students and prepare them for our world. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about world languages. Learning a world language provides students with lifelong cognitive, academic, and career advantages. Research shows that multilingual students develop stronger problem-solving skills, better memory retention, and improved critical thinking. From a career perspective, fluency in another language opens doors to global job opportunities, increases earning potential, and is an asset in fields like business, healthcare, law, government, and STEM. In an increasingly interconnected world, multilingualism is no longer just simply a skill. It's a necessity. Latin in particular offers unique benefits. As the root of over 60% of the English words that a lot of us is our first language, Latin strengthens vocabulary and comprehension, making it especially valuable for students pursuing law, medicine, science, where Latin terminology is foundational. Studies have shown that Latin learners outperform their peers in reading and analytical skills because the language requires careful decoding and logical thinking. I don't know if anyone's ever taken Latin before. Yes, yes. Beyond academics and careers, language learning fosters cultural awareness, empathy, and global citizenship. Investing in world language education is an investment in our students' future success. I truly believe that. I'm going to talk a little bit about Franklin High School now. Budget constraints have forced us to make very difficult decisions about language offerings at Franklin High School, ultimately leading to the phase-out of Latin. Given the financial limitations and challenges of sustaining lower enrollment programs, like Lucas just kind of talked about, the decision was made to discontinue Latin rather than explore alternative models for maintaining the program. As a result, moving forward, Franklin High School will only offer 2 language options for their students, French and Spanish. Some of you might say, wow, that's great, they can choose between 2 languages. However, to put this into context, students in our neighboring districts have significantly more language offerings. So when I say neighboring districts, I'm drawing from the Hockomock League, our Department of Education's DART districts, or just our neighboring towns. And I'm just going to list some. In Andover, Shrewsbury, and Stoughton, they offer Spanish, French, Latin, and Mandarin Chinese. In Canton High School, they offer German, Spanish, French, and Italian. Foxborough High School offers Spanish, French, and American Sign Language. Grafton, Milton, Oliver Ames, and Reading offer French, Spanish, and Latin. Hopkinton offers French, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese. Milford, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, French, Spanish for heritage learners. Sharon, Spanish, French, Mandarin Chinese, Latin, American Sign Language. I'm going to stop there, but there's a lot more. Meanwhile, our students will only have 2 language choices, putting them at a significant disadvantage compared to their peers. Now I'm going to talk about the middle school level. I'm the director 6 to 12. Should be K to 12, but we don't have any language in elementary school, sadly, anymore. Over the past 2 decades, Franklin Public Schools has seen a significant reduction in middle school world language offerings. Once a robust program that included Spanish, Latin, and French at the middle school, with Spanish integrated into core academic teams, meeting daily, we now offer only Spanish at a drastically reduced frequency. Moreover, way back when, Spanish was taught from kindergarten through 8th grade, giving our elementary school students exposure to what we linguists, our language specialists, we call that the critical period for language learning. It's like the sweet spot for our students to be able to acquire, or for humans to acquire language. It's brain research. Again, our students are at a disadvantage compared to their peers in nearby districts, where many middle schoolers have access to multiple languages and more instructional time, setting them up for greater success in high school and beyond. As a comparison, here are a list of some schools that provide significantly more language instruction at the middle school level. This is 6 to 8. Sharon, Westboro, Needham, and Weston offer French, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese at the middle school level. Mansfield, Grafton, North Reading, Dedham, Hanover, and Norwood offer both French and Spanish. Holliston offers Spanish, French, and French immersion, K to 12. Shrewsbury offers Mandarin Chinese, French, Latin, Spanish. Medford, Spanish, French, Italian. Melrose, Spanish, French, Italian, German, Latin. There are more, but this is just the middle school level. Our middle school students only have one language option, and currently they get 30 hours of it a year. This early exposure is critical in developing their language proficiency. Our students are missing out. Unfortunately, these are not the only losses of our world language department has suffered over the past years. Beyond course offerings, budget cuts have also led to the elimination of vital instructional tools and resources, including the termination of our language lab, which has been in place for over a decade. This invaluable resource provided students with interactive opportunities to develop their listening and speaking skills. It is important to note also that the vast majority of our world language courses do not have textbooks. Okay, we do not purchase curriculum. We write it ourselves. We rely on our instructional resources to engage our students and to provide them with a high quality instruction. Budget constraints have prevented the department from purchasing or renewing curricular and instructional resources for at least next school year. While we have worked tirelessly to create engaging and high-quality lessons using district-funded technology, the district has funded our technology in the past, these tools are no longer being funded due to these budgetary cuts and constraints, forcing teachers to spend hours redesigning lesson materials for students from scratch. Some educators have even resorted to paying for essential technology subscriptions out of pocket. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year. It's not right. The World Language Department has worked really hard to maintain high-quality instruction for our students despite budgetary challenges and budgetary cuts. But we're reaching a critical point. Losing Latin, restricting language choices, eliminating technology and engagement tools, and preventing resource updates are not just program cuts. We have to look at them differently. They are lost opportunities for our students. Whenever I tune into these meetings, because I'm from the town, I do listen to a lot of these meetings. I appreciate all your time, and I appreciate all your volunteerism. I don't know how you do it. But I often hear people saying, we approve the money, but we can't dictate how the schools spend it. I hear that a lot. However, this perspective overlooks a key reality. Our school budget is stretched so thin. Again, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, our leaders are left with no choice but to prioritize mandated expenses. And you've heard this, unfunded mandates. They're forced to. As a result, our students miss out on essential opportunities and continue to fall behind their peers. How do we stop the bleeding? And how do we start the healing? We need an operational override that provides sustainable funding to restore and protect these programs. Without it, Franklin students will continue to fall behind their peers who have access to a wider range of courses and extracurricular activities. I urge this committee and the Franklin community, whoever is listening, to recognize the value of world languages, and to find ways to invest in them and in everything, all of our students' educational opportunities, rather than to continue to shrink it. Our students deserve the same opportunities as those neighboring districts, so they can compete in an increasingly global world. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say my
Understood.
piece. I have a
That's fine.
platform. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for listening. Okay.
Okay. Is there anyone, Donna, please, name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Donna Grady. I'm president of the Franklin Education Association. Thank you. Oop, not working. And proud kindergarten teacher, proud veteran teacher of 36 years. My address in town is 500 Lincoln Street. And I seem to be here much more than I am in Walpole. Like Laura, Mrs. Evans, I don't have a question. I want to thank all of you who commit your time volunteering, as many of us do. I know it has not been an easy road. I've been in Franklin for 26 years, so I've been down that road with you. What I do want to address tonight, and again, I was at school committee last night as well, is we're all throwing around numbers, but we need to remember, for us in the school department, those numbers are directly attached to children. Every penny, every dollar affects and impacts a child every day. I had this conversation, I spoke at the House Ways and Means Committee, and I had the entire committee come up and say, I never thought of it that way, I only thought of the money. These are live beings that we impact every day. So when we move money around, it is impacting at least one, if not 100 children every day. I also would like to address a narrative that's been in this town, in our town, for a very long time, that I hear all the time. Knowing also that my union siblings, firefighters, police, and all the other town unions are also facing cuts and have cut. But one of the false narratives that I always feel the need to address as a child advocate and an educator advocate is that the teachers always take the lesser. We always take the hit in order to save something for the children, which is correct, and to save colleagues, also correct. However, I was hired 26 years ago. That year, we hired 75 teachers. 75 teachers. Pretty much every year since then, we have had to cut between 20 and 50 teachers. So the narrative, when we take a lesser raise, or we take lesser something, or we take on more something in order to save our colleagues, in theory is true. In reality is not, because we've always taken the hit of losing more and more talented educators. A community member just asked, you know, why are we not retaining teachers? When I was hired, Franklin was the premier town to come to. That's why we hired 75 teachers, 75 educators that year. The instability that we have seen year after year after year after year, people don't, educators, first of all, no one's flocking to be an educator. I can't imagine why. But nobody is coming to Franklin because of the continued instability. We all have the same bills as everybody else in the community and need to be able to afford our families and the things that we do. And yes, we use a lot of our money we know students need things. Oh, I know my student needs this. I don't hesitate, I'm gonna use my money to get it. But people can't come and think every year there's gonna be a 15% hike in health insurance, 20%, or we may cut 20 more. Is it gonna be me? Last one hired, first one fired. People, all of us in every facet of our community need to know that we have steady work. We haven't been able to say that for the educational community in a really long time. most of the people hired when I was hired are still here, because we believe in that Franklin that put our kids first and their educational opportunities first. We know that's a want, but we need to make things happen so that those kids, as Mrs. Evans said, have those same opportunities in the global community. We want them to be globally aware citizens who are part of the Franklin community, their school communities, but the world community. And the only way we can do that is to fund what we find valuable. I hope that we find our children's education of the utmost value. Thank you again for all you do and for listening as well.
Thank you, Donna. Please. Please, name and
Yeah.
address for those who
No,
don't know who you are.
Ian Bergen, 16 Peters Lane, and this will be quick. I just, more just a response to last time and just a request. Anyway, first, thank you for doing this, for holding these sessions. You know, you talk about this as democracy at its best, so I really appreciate it. And I have to write it down because my mind goes blank from time to time. It happens, so. But at the last session, a very eloquent statement was made, and it said, just because people voted no doesn't mean they don't care about our schools. But I began thinking, and I said, from a different perspective, just because people voted yes doesn't mean they don't care about the people who were struggling financially who needed to vote no. As a matter of fact, many people who are living on fixed incomes or struggling voted yes. When we ask them why, they say things like, I'm willing to sacrifice because I have an obligation to give back to the next generation. That's why I worked all my life, and that's in the case of older citizens. But I think the issues around the school needs of schools are kind of old news. It's been pretty well spelled out over the last number of years that the schools are losing ground, that it is mathematically impossible to maintain level services when the cost of everything is skyrocketing. We know that. Transportation, insurance, technology, special ed, the real cost drivers. But we know that the needs in our community go way beyond the schools. One only had to listen to the last town council meeting to be made dramatically aware of the public safety needs confronting us. When our respected fire chief spoke about the increase in call volume, a question was asked, can we think differently how we respond to falls at home so we can focus on bigger emergencies? And how long can we hold out without getting a third ambulance and the staff for it? Well, alarm bells went off for me because, oh, my hands are shaking. I don't know why I'm doing. I'm not nervous. I just don't know why I'm doing that.
It's cold in here. It's cold in here. It's cold in here.
My hand, I don't usually, I don't know why I'm doing that. But I know firsthand, as so many of us do know, the need for a quick response, especially for that of a frightened and lonely senior citizen when that call is made. And of course, the fire department will respond and continue to respond to all 911 calls. They made that clear. They are incredible. It's just that the first time someone can't be reached in time when another ambulance would have made the difference, I know for sure that the words, the pie just wasn't big enough, will ring hollow. One request that I make, and I think several people have mentioned it already, is that when misinformation is floated out there that is aggressively and immediately challenged, I get really upset when I hear that the town is mismanaging finances. You don't get a AAA bond rating when the town is that is just absolutely not true, and that stuff is floated out there. And then when people say the schools are just mismanaging money, no. I think it's really important that we continue, as Jamie says, tell the story. Tell how it's not the last 10 years, it's the last 20 years in terms of the creative scheduling, in terms of redistricting, in terms of bringing back special ed programs, in terms of combining teams, all of the different things that the schools have done. But we have to tell the story. Jamie, you said that very eloquently. We have to just, because correcting that misinformation is so important, because the people have to trust us and know that we're transparent. So here's my other thing. This is my last thing, because I'm rambling on and I'm shaking, my hands are shaking. But, anyway.
Doing fine, Ann.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great.
I just know that families are kind of, exhausted. You think about the end of the day when families come home and they're tired and they're not delving into financial reports. They want to know a couple of things. They want to know, what does the town need? How much is it going to cost? And will it be worth my sacrifice? Because make no mistake about it, it is a sacrifice for everyone when taxes are raised. It is, that's for sure. So I don't know how, it's beyond my pay raise, how we prioritize, how we do this. Maybe we do a series of small overrides over the years, I don't know. But I think people need to know for what. For example, is it for an ambulance and the staff? Is it for reducing transportation fees for parents? Is it maybe a social worker in the town that's going to connect needy families to services? Maybe it's going to be more sidewalks on Forest Street. Or maybe it'll be a new rec center worthy of the incredible staff who runs it. So that's it. Last thing I'm going to say is this. Now, more than ever in the world, we need courageous voices, leaders who shape public opinion and are not just swayed by it, to act in the best interest of our entire community, to create a vision for the common good, and advocate with all the passion that can be mustered. And that's it, because I can't.
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Ann.
That was a presidential quote, Dr. Bergen.
Yeah, that was-
So I just want to point out that Dr. Bergen cut me in line. But she's Ann Bergen, so she can literally do whatever she wants, so it's fine. It's fine. She can do whatever she wants. It's fine. So I actually do have a question. I'm not just here to...
Just name and address, please.
Sorry, Jody Klein, 9 Evergreen Drive. I've lived in town for, 13 years. 3 years ago, I became an employee of Franklin Public Schools. I'm now the district-wide physical therapist. I'm also the girls' soccer coach. So I am, all in Franklin now. The more I get involved in the FEA and the more I try to understand joint budget and try to understand town finance and everything that is going on, I think I learned something, picked up something 2 joint budget meetings ago. And if I'm wrong, I need you to correct me. And if I'm not wrong, then I'm looking for an explanation and when it happened, because it doesn't make sense to me, and other people that I speak to about it can't answer the question. When we're talking about health insurance across all of the departments in town, my understanding from a couple meetings ago is that the school's health insurance is in our line item 300, and all of the other departments' health insurance is in the other line item. I think it's like 910 or something like that. That's right. My assumption is that it is because there are so many school employees. I don't know if that's the answer, and that our health insurance is remarkably more expensive than anyone else's. But I don't know if that's the answer. So I'm looking for if we are all sort of all need to abide by, without an override or an underride, we all need to abide by that 2.5%. Why is our health insurance in our line item when everyone else's is separate? And I don't know if it's been answered already, but it's something I don't understand.
We did quickly get into it at our last session, but I'll let Jamie and Lucas.
At the other public, the
last
listening
one,
section?
At the Elks.
Oh, I missed that one, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Jamie and Lucas will bring it.
Sure. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and people can go back and watch, it was probably about a half hour of that meeting because there was some different folks asking different questions about healthcare. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it does actually not matter what account it's in. And the reason why is because it really comes out of the entire pie of the budget regardless. And at the end of the day, we all work under an insurance advisory committee, which is a statutory piece. A member of the teachers union is on it. Each of the other unions is a non-union or retiree. And the cost of healthcare, it doesn't really matter what line item it's in. The most important part is that it's very expensive for several reasons. One, we all live in the highest healthcare state in the country. We've lost many providers in Massachusetts. Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts merged a few years ago, so there's one less competitor in the marketplace. So there's less competition. And
So
as
I
it-
will, let me stop you for
Yep.
just for 1 second. I've worked in healthcare for 20 years,
Yep,
so
physical therapy.
if you want to explain it to everyone, that's fine. You don't need to explain all of the minutia of healthcare to me. I guess I'm wondering just the point as it's related to a town budget. If line items sort of don't matter, then maybe that's the answer.
Well, at the last meeting, and Lucas will talk about this, we're happy to take the healthcare into one budget. The problem is for the schools is that if you have, say, 400 people on healthcare, when you anticipate it, the budget, like right now, they're anticipating an assumption of the budget of, say, 400 people, whatever the number is. By the time you get to October 1st or in the mid-year, after you go through open enrollment, that may mean for them it's 390 people take the healthcare. So that 10 people actually saves the schools a ton of money in their budget. They can actually use that in other ways and gives them greater flexibility, as well as if they have a surplus at the end of the year, like we discussed at other meetings, they can encumber that to the future year and the next year. So as long as I've been here in 10 years, this request has never come up from any of the superintendents or the school committees. And I think that's a general reason why the schools have it and wanted to use it and control, work with the employees under their system. But for ours on the town, half of our departments are one employee. So we're not going to go through from an administrative point and put 25 different accounts of healthcare. It's just in 910 in the benefits budget. If you're looking for that benefits increase, that increase for town-wide actually also includes in that budget retired teachers' healthcare, the GIC healthcare, we have workers' comp, which is for the schools. All of those accounts in 910 are generally merged services that the town has put in its budget and manages all that. But a lot of the money, even the Norfolk County retirement system, are a lot of actual school employees. So we manage those through our Human Resources Department, and we have a full-time benefits manager that covers that. And that person does actually work with the school department. They're all in the same office, so they all talk to each other and work very collaboratively.
I'm glad you asked this question, even though it was answered. I think there's new folks listening too. So what Jamie just brought up is, one, no superintendent prior has brought this up as a recommendation. As long as I've known, it's been in the school budget. I think the question at hand is around, when you look at a total increase for schools, the argument that folks were making was around the percentage. And I had some conversations with individuals after that last meeting around this. We could wholesale shift 7 million, a little over, into a different line. I think the question at hand is, I think it's a matter of the public conversation around the percentage increase of schools, and if you took that out, what would that be? So I said to someone, well, what if I showed you two percentages? What if I showed you a 3.64 and then a 3.78, which includes the healthcare? Would that at least answer your question on what we're trying to do? Because what I would say to the community is, I don't believe the focus right now, that could be an offline, off-season conversation too, about a bigger idea. But the goal that, I don't know, what keeps me up at night is having our community rally around this $3.6 million deficit. So where the healthcare lives, to me, it's important for people to get answers to, and that's why I'm so glad you asked it, Jody. But if I can delineate and show a percentage of our increase, and then what of it is impacted by healthcare once those are finalized. But what I would say to you is, the goal, I think, is to really refocus and say, with that in mind, okay, if we know those two numbers and that's what you have and you can see that, hopefully maybe people who were critical of the percentage increase to schools, if they saw a lower percentage of just our number, does that suffice for you if you were critical about seeing a larger increase for schools? If you're on the school side and you saw that delineated so that you could see that, would that help you? Because I think it's more of a political conversation than it is around the bookkeeping of it. But I do appreciate that it's come up, because I said this to probably 3 or 4 people. I really want to see us move to, let's have that info out and have that, and people can form their own opinions. But at the end of the day, we have to work together to solve a $3.6 million structural deficit. And how do we focus our energy onto that cause and then worry about that? It's all documented in fine print for folks to see where all the money is and where it goes. But that would just be my follow-up to that. And that's why I would say that I wouldn't want to spend our time moving that out right now if I could just provide a number or a stat that helps people to try to move forward. I hope that answers some of the questioning around it.
It does, and I think, I don't know, for me and maybe for other school staff, the frustrating part about the fact that an override, we had a failed override, the fact that an override benefits all of our departments, not just the school department. And the stigma and the negativity on social media seems to be primarily directed at the school department and what the school is looking for, to the point where last night we have, school committee members almost begging the community for an override. We have teachers, we have community members, begging the community for help. And, it gives us that third ambulance. It gives us, more mental health services at the police department. It gives us things across the town. But I think because our budget is so large, we take the biggest hit in social media, which is frustrating when the entire town would benefit from that. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please name and address.
Hi, Shannon Nealon, Franklin resident. I have 3 young kids. I have a kid in middle school, elementary school, and one in daycare, which is literally killing me, the cost of it. So I cannot wait for him to join his brothers in school. I didn't write anything down, so you'll have to excuse me if I ramble.
That's fine.
I think that I wanted to speak today about the doing part of this. We have the listening sessions, which, 10 out of 10, no notes, great job. But eventually, we're gonna get to the doing part of this. We're gonna get to, there is gonna be a budget, an override put on a ballot, clearly, right? We are gonna need to go that route. There is a deficit, but how do we get there? How do we bridge the gap that has been created between the communities or within the community in getting people that maybe voted no to yes? So I in watching social media and following things, it kind of seemed like there's kind of 3 camps kind of boiling in Franklin. There's the absolute yes camp. I don't think you need to reach those people. They're in, full stop. There's also probably, don't be mad, but there's probably the absolute no people. There's probably people that no matter what you say, they are not going to vote yes, right? But I encourage you to think of this, that the largest group is in the middle. There is a large swath of Franklin who either, like me, voted yes but felt really nervous about it, or voted no, not because they hate kids or they hate teachers, which is the prevailing narrative. Anytime somebody says they voted no, it's like, you hate children. No. But people are entitled to know where their money's going, and they're also entitled to feel comfortable with where it's going. And that's the part that I think you need to work towards. I think if you can reach those people, you will get it passed. There were several things. I talked to a lot of people in between, either before it or after it. Why did you vote no? Why did you vote yes, but you were hesitant? And the prevailing consensus was that it was far too rushed and people didn't know what was going on. You're fixing that here. Fantastic. There wasn't hard numbers, so it seemed very loosey-goosey, and it wasn't clear how much we needed and what was going on. That made people nervous. You're fixing that too. Everybody worked super hard, extra hours, got their budgets in, fixed. Fantastic. The bigger part, and this might hurt some feelings, but the bigger part is trust. There's a lack of trust that where this money is going to go to where the people say they want it to go. I don't ever see, let me rephrase that. It seems like, although you say it's all one big pot, which I can understand conceptually, feels like the schools are the only ones that are ever held hostage. I don't hear, the schools are fully funded, we're good, don't worry about it. But if we don't get this override, we're gonna have to shut down the police department, so you're gonna have to get your police in Millis. Or your trash isn't gonna get picked up and your roads aren't gonna be plowed because we have to shut down the DPW. We only ever hear about the schools are in danger. We see budgets where we have new hires, we have people hired back at raises, We have raises over cost of living raises. I think that was kind of the concerns last time. But we're funding all these other things, and then it's like, oh, shoot, we forgot about the schools. The schools feels like they're last in line, and they're obviously really, really struggling. The only thing we heard last time, and predominantly this time, is from teachers begging, literally begging, for more resources, and I want all that, because I have kids coming up in the school. I want more language, whoever brought that up. I want more of these services, but it can't be just the feeling that it's the schools being held hostage, and that, I think, is contributing to this other narrative that it's the school's fault, right? Because all we talk about is that we really just need the money for the schools, and if it's one big pot, that's not true. So I think reframing the narrative might help. I think my last point to this is you're gonna need to, from my perspective, compromise. As a divorce and probate litigator for a long time, I can tell you that the best compromises every single time involved everybody being mad. That's just the way it is. Because everybody had to lose a little bit. So when you're going about putting together what the override is going to look like, I am begging you to please make some concessions, not in where the funding goes, but listen during these listening sessions to what people want to understand. If it means sliding the line item over to make people feel more comfortable that it's not the schools that are overdoing it, maybe that's something. If it's one big bucket and it doesn't matter, but that might make some people feel better, there's a couple more votes for you. If we're talking about how to structure the override, somebody at the last session, I wasn't able to make it, but I did listen to most of it. Somebody at the last session, a woman who seemed very well versed, I think she was on the finance committee at some point, she suggested a 5-year future
Forecast.
there you go. Forecast, that's why you have that job. The forecast. So that seemed like a great idea for those of us who are working and have kids and are in sports, and I was just at a band concert. It's wild. So when someone says something, an idea like that, and they say, maybe we get a 5-year forecast so we can see where the money's gonna go. When I vote yes for this, again, where is the money gonna go? Are we sure it's gonna go to the schools, or are we gonna be back here again? And I believe your response, no offense, was, I wouldn't do that. I don't think that's a good idea, and because it would scare people or whatever. I'm encouraging you to rethink that position. There was someone else that suggested, there was a couple suggestions about making a line item for each part of like allocating the funds so that we knew this part of the override was gonna go to schools. We need to know that the schools are going to be protected and that we're not gonna be here when the police station comes in. There's going to be extra costs for that. I liked how you explained the whole other, what's that one called? Come on. With the police,
The debt
there you go,
exclusion.
debt exclusion. Oh, see, come on. The debt exclusion. So the debt exclusion is a separate tax, but that's another tax people are gonna have to take on. And with another police station and with the endless growth in this community, there's gonna be a lot more resources needed. So there's going to be more things to eat away at that budget. And I think the person that said, break it out and make it specific to schools, the response was also, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think we should do that. We have to start finding ways to reach the people in the middle. If you come out with this budget or this override at the end, and you're super psyched because it was written the way you wanted, and you think it's exactly right, then you did it wrong. You should feel uncomfortable, because we feel uncomfortable. So everybody needs to give a little. We need to see your buy-in, and the buy-in comes from, I'll do this, even though it doesn't make sense to me in my brain, I'm gonna say it this way, because that brought some people over. Or we're gonna line out the schools and say definitively, money will go to the schools first, whatever it is. But you're gonna have to be uncomfortable, and you're gonna have to be a little bit upset at the end, because that is a true compromise, and that's how you reach those people in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, that's why we started this process back in September, starting from scratch, starting from the beginning, as to how we build the budget and why we build it the way that we do. I did, and to answer one of your early questions, I did, as to when, as to when.
My solicitor, my attorney general, sorry.
As to when this is all, when we're going to actually get there. It's a long process, and we have stated that from day one. We want the residents and we want the community to be able to watch the process from beginning to end. I did make a statement, I think it was at the October meeting, that I would ask, as chairman of the council, I would ask the council to put a ballot question on for an override in February. I have taken a half a step back because of the schedule of the listening sessions goes into March. I want to make sure that those are completed before we get to the putting the ballot question on in front of the council. So that I have tentatively scheduled for the second meeting in March is when we currently have it on that agenda. Again, we're not there with the exact number yet. We're not there with the date yet. But those two pieces, my intent with the Joint Budget Subcommittee is to make a recommendation to the council as to what that number is, whether it is the structural deficit that we currently have. And it's a town-wide structural deficit. It is not just the schools, it is town-wide. And if for whatever reason, a ballot question either doesn't get put on or gets voted down, we have to come up with $3.6 million worth of cuts across the entire community. Are the schools going to take a piece of it? Absolutely. As the town, as the police, fire, DPW, everybody's going to take a piece if in fact it fails. We do need to come together. That's what we're trying to do here. And that's what the message we're trying to get to the community. And it's so frustrating at times, certainly for me, reading some of the social media stuff, that, my God, we are one town. We are the town of Franklin. And we need to work together to solve this problem, which is a $3.8 million or $7 million structural deficit as we sit here today. And I think, and I'm sorry if I get a little excited sometimes with some of this, just because it's gone on for so long, and I just get frustrated with hearing the same things. I'd like to, just before you come up and ask questions, I have a question I'd like to bring to the Chief of Police. TJ.
So should I go?
Yeah,
I don't know, you don't ask the lawyer. You don't ask the lawyer to come back to the mic.
That's why I called them up, to take you away.
I'm my own counsel, so I'll be.
No, actually, I wanted to ask the chief a question, just so the audience can hear a little bit from the municipal part of our government.
I don't think you have to stay there.
You don't have to stay. You're good.
But it does address, I think, some of her questions.
It does address some of what her questions were. What are the impacts to the police department if you have 4 police officers cut in your budget?
Yeah, and I expect if we put an override in the budget, or we have to cut 3.6, 3.7 million, that I would lose 4 officers, which I only gained 2 years ago, which is going to put us back to 54 sworn which is the same number of sworn we were budgeted for 25 years ago in the year 2000.
Say that one more time.
It would put us back from 58 to 54, which is the number of officers we were budgeted for 25 years ago in the year 2000. We dropped all the way to 38, and we bounced back when I became chief at 46. We have added 12 in the last 8 years, but we are only 4 more than what we were actually budgeted for 25 years ago in the year 2000. So that is what it's basically gonna do, depending on what we decide to do and how, are we gonna take away a detective's position? Are we gonna take away the community service office? Are we gonna take away some of the officers that were put on patrol? We haven't really got to that yet, but it's definitely gonna cause some, if we took them all out of patrol, we're back to where we were. We're 1 over the minimum. That's just 1 officer scheduled over the minimum number of officers that we need for the town. By the way, the minimum number of officers per shift, per hour, has not increased in 25 years. Because we just don't have the numbers to do it. I've been with the department for 29 years. 24 of the 29 years, I've been in the command staff. A lieutenant, the deputy chief, and the chief of police. Brian Chandler can attest to the same thing. We have never had the number of officers technically that we really need. We have always been behind, but we've always been able to make do. And do I ever think we're gonna get to the mid-60s? Whereas what other communities similar in size, such as Needham, such as Norwood, forget Natick, way above that. You're talking well into the 80s. Norwood's in mid-60s. 26,000 residents, 10 square miles. 35,000 residents, 27.5 square miles is us. We do a good job with what we have, but like any other, and it's not just the police. It is the fire department, which would lose the 3rd ambulance. They eloquently did a great job the other day during that town council meeting explaining, that's a double edge right there. Not only are you losing the 3rd ambulance and the ability for that to serve the public, you're also losing the revenue that they bring in, because now all those calls for service that ambulance is not able to go to is now gonna be billed by the other communities. And it's the schools. Our teachers are underpaid. My wife is a teacher in the Walpole Public Schools, only because they were looking for speech pathologists at the time 10 years ago, and she took a job there. But she knows that people have left Franklin to go to other communities because of pay and other type issues, and the fear of not being able to have a job, the following year because of the cuts that are gonna happen. As you said before, and I agree with it 100%, the town has never had enough money to really be able to do what it's done. We have only had 1 Prop 2.5 override related specifically to the general fund. That was 1.7 million. It was supposed to be 3.5. People got scared and decided, hey, we got to go for something lower. Of course, the following year or 2, we were right back in the same position we were before. Yeah. So unlike other towns and cities that have done smaller overrides here, there, or whatever else, to be able to be in a better position when you're looking at, you're looking at inflation at 9%, blah, blah, blah. It was 3% January to January just recently. But all those increases during COVID and after and all that, nothing's gone down. Certainly hasn't gone down. So 2.5%, and our biggest funding money is property taxes. It's just, the math doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question, sir.
You did.
All right, thank you.
Please come forward. Not yet, anyway. The night's still young.
What are you planning?
Please, come forward.
Thank you.
Name and address, please.
My name's Jamie Corbman. I don't live in Franklin. I teach in Franklin. Do you still need my address?
Use the high school.
Yeah.
The high school, 208 Oak Street. Thank you. I'm also realizing that you and I are
Nice
wearing
tie.
the same. It's very nice.
Teamwork.
Thank you. I started teaching in Franklin in 2008. Before that, I taught in Pennsylvania for 3 years, and before that, I taught in England for 2 years. I want to talk a little bit about my experience and what I see right now in the building. And I'm not asking you to make money magically appear from nowhere, though we somehow do that in Rhode Island. I'm not asking you to take any money away, any funding away from any of the other vital services our town has. But I want you to have an image of what it's like at the high school. When I started in 2008, I was one of 60 applicants. It was incredibly difficult for me to get that position. And I love teaching at Franklin, I really do. And I teach 11th grade English. And it is This is not a brag, but it is impossible to overstate how important 11th grade English is to a student's high school experience. If there is one course that colleges look at with greater scrutiny than any other course for what is the student's development of communication skills, it is 11th grade English. So we start this course, we have to hit the ground running instantly. And the students know this, and they are ready to go, and they are primed, and they are terrified. And the most important resource I have to rely on is my colleagues in the department, the other English teachers. Last year, 2 English teachers were cut, and the year before that, it was another 1 or 2 English teachers were cut. What that means is, at the beginning of the year, when I need to know right away, who is this kid, what's going on in his head, what does he need, one of the best things I can do is talk to his or her sophomore English teacher. And if that person's not available, his or her 9th grade English teacher. So when a student turns in that first essay and it comes way out of left field, and did this kid not read the book at all? Or it's absolutely magnificent and I should push this kid up to the next level. I need to talk to that 10th grade teacher. Well, right now, probably a third of my students' sophomore English teacher or freshman English teacher is no longer in the building. And probably between 15 and 20% of them, both of those teachers, are no longer in the building. And from a student's perspective, that must be terrifying to start 11th grade and know it's so important, and then you get your first essay back and you get a C-, and then I'm going to go and talk to my teacher last year that I knew and loved, and she's gone, and the one before that is gone too. I can't imagine what that experience is like. Both of those teachers who were eliminated last year were offered positions elsewhere in the district in the middle schools because teachers left the middle schools. And both of those teachers declined the position, and I talked to both of them personally, and they said the same thing. Look, this stability isn't there. I need to be able to support my family. And I was cut this year. I was given a position. I might be cut next year. I need to have a job where I know I can stay. And as I started by saying, 60 teachers applied for my position when I applied. When we have openings now, we get 2 positions, we get 2 applicants, we get 4 applicants. Sometimes we get nobody, and it's very difficult. And there are 2 reasons for that. One of them is we pay amongst the lowest in the Hawk, and the other is we don't have that stability. And teachers don't do this to become millionaires. They do this because they want something safe and reliable, and because we love children. But they want something safe and reliable, and if that's not there, people aren't applying for these positions, and it is so difficult to teach in a dwindling department. And if there's anything we can do to restore that stability in the school, that will do so much for our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Bierce, and I live on Summer Street here in Franklin. I have lived here for almost 26 years, and my husband has lived here for almost 31. I actually have a few questions tonight.
Sure.
One thing is, the override that took place, I believe it was 2 years ago for the Tri-County School, has that hit our property taxes yet? Or that increase, or are we still waiting for that Prop 2.5 to hit our property taxes?
That debt exclusion the majority of that debt exclusion, a small sliver has already been plugged into this year's budget, just a small portion of it, about 10%.
Okay.
The vast majority of the rest, about 80% or so, is going to hit folks in FY26. There's a Tri-County building website where they're mapping all this out for people. They're going through the MSBA, they're doing the borrowing. The MSBA, by the way, is the Mass School Building Authority that pays 50% of the cost of the building.
Right.
They're going through all that now. We're going to have a revised number at the March council meeting.
Okay.
But then in FY27, 2 years from now, there will be another, I'm estimating another 10 or 20% of that number will hit then. But to answer your question directly, a 2/3, 3/4, a massive bulk of that tax increase will hit in FY '26.
Right.
And I'm guessing, again, don't hold me to the number, but for an average home of about 650,000, which is what was modeled out roughly at the vote in town, that's about $120 that will hit this year, approximately.
Okay.
And just, yep,
Yeah.
you read Kobe. So it is a debt exclusion, not
Okay.
to get wonky, but it is important.
Right. Well, because I think it's important for people to know that if we're talking about entertaining
Yep.
another Prop 2.5, that we haven't actually seen the Tri-County Prop 2.5 hit us financially yet.
So
And I
that
didn't realize that until somebody told me that last year.
You'll, if you read my March 5th
Okay.
memo, it is all, that exact point is going to be laid out,
Okay.
Kimberly. The difference between a Prop 2.5 and a debt exclusion, the overwhelming amount of citizens just see it as a tax increase, and I respect that. But it is very important to note that one of the reasons why the Tri-County School was, just happened to be the timing of it, but a debt exclusion, the tax sunsets when the bonds are paid off. The reason why I mention this is not just to be wonky, but
You
Keller
like that word, don't
Keller
you?
Sullivan and Horace Mann schools
Yeah.
were done on 20-year bonds
Yeah.
by this guy over here at some point. And those taxes have sunset over the last 3 fiscal years. So you don't see the tax break in your bill.
Right.
But what I think the council has made the decision on, I think the Councilor Frangilla's point a moment ago, and all of the Finance Committee was, you know, that debt service has been falling off for people, which has helped mitigate the tax rate for sure. But you also want to make sure, you do, as a community, we still do have some space in that debt area to be able to compensate for Tri-County. And that's the same strategy we're going to employ in 2 or 3 years once the design for the police station. And by the way, also the redesign and remodel for this building, Remington Jefferson needs an overhaul because it's at its 30 years. So
Right.
that is a debt exclusion. Those taxes will sunset at some point. A Prop 2.5 is permanent forever.
Right, okay. The next question I have is, like many towns, a couple of years ago, you know, the state told us that, you know, we were to open up hotels if we had them, and, you know, and I don't want to say this the wrong way because I don't mean it disrespectfully at all, but we laid off, I believe, about that year. Teachers got, about approximately 30 teachers got pink slips before the end of the school year. And I know my oldest was still at the high school then. And then all of a sudden, we're being told, like, we're hiring all these specific teachers. So I guess my question is, I know that the state was supposed to reimburse towns. Has the town of Franklin received their reimbursement that they are completely caught up with what the state said that they would pay? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
All
and we-
right.
Go ahead. Go
You-
ahead.
yeah,
Lisa.
The
that's
short
fine.
answer is yes, we have,
okay.
and the money has gone to the direct benefit of the students. That was
Okay.
the condition. When the
Yes.
state provided the funding, was that that money couldn't be used for like some other project. It had to go to the direct benefit of the kids who they, students who they had placed. So yes,
And that
the
was
answer is
paying for transportation,
Transportation,
per
education.
student cost,
Yes.
all of
Yep.
that.
Educators,
Okay,
yes.
And
okay.
to add one more point on to your
Sure.
question, yes,
Sure.
because a lot of people ask me about the hotel tax.
Yep.
The hotel tax has been fully paid, and the town has not lost any revenue
Okay.
from the hotel tax, from the hotel. So
Okay.
we have been made whole.
Okay. The other thing is, because I'm a person that I do the finances in our house, so I'm like, there are no problems, there are only solutions. Though I realize that's not always true, but I like to look at the glass as half full instead of half empty. So as I was kind of brainstorming for tonight, I was thinking about how, I know when COVID hit, you know, the state had, I forget exactly what it is that you call it, but where breakfast and lunch is provided in every school across the board, whether or not a family financially needs it or they don't. Now, that's been going on for almost 5 years now, maybe?
Since COVID.
Since 20,
so-
2020?
Correct, yes.
So is there a way to, in all honesty, like, I mean, yes, in our house, we live paycheck to paycheck. I'm not gonna lie. But my daughter doesn't have to reap the benefits of getting lunch every single day at the high school. But there are families who actually, you know, they qualify for that. Is there a way to make some sort of deal with the state that the money that they are spending on those two programs, that we go back to the way that it used to be, where it really was just for families who qualified for it, instead of, you know, like my daughter that takes advantage of it. And yes, it's a wonderful treat, but if I was paying for it, she would probably be, you know, getting lunch like once a month, you know. I mean, at school. I mean, I would pack her a lunch, obviously. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, I'm just wondering, like, if there are, like, is the state, you know, thinking about all that money that they're spending on that program? Is there a way to get that money from the state to put towards, I'll just use the schools because I know the schools are a hot topic tonight, but is there a way to get that? I don't know.
I can't speak for what the state would do to allocate. I think their goal was to provide universal breakfast and lunch to all kids, to just level the playing field. Whether, you know, regardless of what you had mentioned is the criteria for the poverty level that the federal government states. So I think the goal was to put that forward, so that was a barrier that could be removed. It started in COVID, as you remember, and then through advocacy across the state, they made the decision to extend it. Remember, it was like a 1-year extension, and then it built in to become more permanent. I don't see that going away, and I don't. Do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. I can add a little color to that. As the funds for universal school lunches, the money specifically comes from the Fair Share Amendment that was voted by on a couple years ago, and we're seeing those revenues the past couple years with that going to cities and towns. So the money is specifically allocated in the budget for school lunches, and that's what the reimbursements go towards municipalities specifically for, and that's how it's written in law for that, from that extra revenue, specifically from fair share. So as far as I understand,
there's no way to rewrite the law, huh?
Well, we can't do that, no.
No, I know you
Not
can't
locally, but
single-handedly
like at the state
do
level,
that,
you
but
Yeah, I don't see an appetite for that,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah,
I think there
really.
was a pun intended.
No, there really wasn't.
no pun intended, right?
But yeah, so
okay.
I mean, the short answer would be no. The money is allocated in the budget specifically for that purpose from the fair share revenue.
Right. And you know, I should have said first, I appreciate all of you and have the utmost respect for all of you for taking this on, and I appreciate the fact that you've tried to explain ahead of time about this. And you know, my children have been very lucky to have wonderful teachers all through the years, and their education is the utmost importance to my husband and I. But I think at the end of the day, we're faced with the same concerns that, you know, all of you are, and that is, you know, being able to support our community and support the church we belong to, and, you know, help a daughter who's in college and one who's 2 years from now will be heading to college, and, you know, just paying our own bills. So, you know, I worry, I'll be honest, and I don't mean this negatively towards anyone, but I worry about another increase going through, because like for this year, I mean, club fees increased, you know, sports more than doubled at the high school this year. You know, I don't have a driver yet, and she probably won't drive for a while at this point because she doesn't want to pay the parking fee. And then, you know, and then there's a parking fee now, which for years was free. So I know we in our own house have had to make some really tough choices. And there's a lot of things that, you know, we've decided we just can't do anymore. And things that we've had to put off. So I have the utmost respect for all of you in this tough situation to budget it, but I feel like, I know there's gotta be a solution. I just don't know, I guess, what it is. I wish I had the magical answer, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just answer one thing just for you? You mentioned the fees, and I think
Yeah.
the fees increasing were a real, I have a daughter who's an athlete in Franklin
Yeah.
who I pay the athletic fee
Yeah.
for one of her sports. And I just wanted to say the budget that we put forth that was approved last night,
Yeah.
we really thought long and hard. And we had some tough questions around, hey, wait, what do you, we are looking to adjust our fees back into more of a market value range as part of this. So when we eventually get to the place where we're advocating to solve our structural deficit, the number we put forth incorporates some restorations of some key cuts that occurred over the summer. Returning our transportation and our athletic fees into more of a realm. So the idea is we put a budget forward that's over budget technically right now, right? And we think we've heard about that. Mr. Helen and Mr. Mercer talked about if we don't solve this, cuts will be coming, right? But on the flip side, if we're able to rally and unify and come together, we have a chance to, this budget does reflect, because I'm thinking, if I vote for this and approve it, I'd like to see that some of my fees come back down into earth. And that came at the cost of some other positions that other folks have advocated for. And I think the comment that, I think it was Ms. Nealon mentioned around compromises, we can't bring everything back that's been lost. The chief's point around trying to build up over years to get his squad up to where he eventually wants to see, we can't do all of it in one shift. But what we can do today is look at how do we stabilize ourselves a bit? How do we rally around? There's a shared interest in solving this, in my opinion. But I just wanted to point out that the fee structures, we met with the policy subcommittee. This budget was approved to incorporate, to bring some of those fees down, and hopefully that offsets maybe some of the conversations around what would an override increase look like. So just wanted to put that out there for you.
And by the way, I don't do social media because I really don't
I don't
like
either.
it.
I go mental.
I would actually have my whole family get rid of their phones if they would allow me to. But thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, name and address, please.
Sure. Steve Malloy at 19 Russet Hill Road. A couple of questions just on the budget itself. I'm trying very hard to understand. I've attended a lot of meetings last year, kind of followed this process, and just want to make sure I kind of get it. So am I right to say that the operating budget for this year proposed is $168 million?
Let me just pull it up here. So yes and no. So it's actually 150.
Okay.
And the reason why it's 168 is because the town has 4 enterprise funds, which are Mass General Law, statutorily separate funds that are just paid by ratepayers. So those of you out there that are on private well, you don't pay into this fund. If you're on private septic and you're not on public sewer, you pay into the enterprise funds to have public water, public sewer, public trash, and the public stormwater utility. So by law, the council has to, the legislative body, which is the town council, they have to legally approve all of this at what is a town council meeting, which would be town meeting in smaller towns. The reason why the revolving funds for the schools are not in here is because Mass statute authorizes the school committee through the school business administrator and the superintendent to authorize the expenditure of those funds. That's why the revolving funds for the schools are not here. So the actual operating budget, which was your question, in this proposal as of today is $150,170,074. It says total all budgets up top, and then enterprise funds are down below.
Okay, that's what I wasn't clear on. So it's really 150 and that extra, those enterprise funds. Who pays those? The actual homeowners that incur those costs, or?
They're ratepayers. So if you're on public water or public sewer, you pay into those funds based on what your usage is.
Okay.
If you're got low flow toilets, you probably use less water, so you pay less money.
But flush
If you have
twice.
industrial residential toilets, some people, then you pay more. If you water your lawns, you got a 1 acre parcel and you water your lawns, you're gonna pay more than if you're in downtown, you don't have a lawn, you're not watering it, right? Stuff like that. So same thing with sewer. And then everybody that's on solid waste disposal in that account, that is not the recycling center. That is the trash carts at the curbside pickup for recycling and trash. That pays for waste management and the recycling services to haul that out of town. That's all a separate legally established fund under Mass General Law.
Okay, but it's not part of your operating
It's
budget?
not part of the
It's all paid
operating
for
budget.
directly by usage, however that works out.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. So just looking back, like you have fiscal 23, 24, 25, I mean, we were at 128 million a couple of years ago. Right now, we're proposing 150 for this year, just reading across there.
Yep.
I mean, it's going up several $1 million a year,
Yep.
the budget, right?
Yep. So to make it try to be easy for folks, there's pie charts all throughout our budget documents online. You can look at them for FY25, but ultimately the 2.5%, if you go to the first page on that budget, you'll see what's called a control sheet. And I'll hold it up for you. It's right here.
Okay, so you know,
Okay?
yeah.
That's your revenue chart. And if you go up to the top, you'll see across 23, 24, 25, 26 estimated, you'll see prior year tax levy plus 2.5.
Yep.
That's your legally allowable Prop 2.5. New growth is right there, and you have a full tax levy. Trust me, Steve, I'm not gonna go through a 30-minute webinar. And then debt exclusions, and then state revenue, other revenues. The big piece there, if you look over the tenure of since the pandemic in FY 23 to 25, you can see structurally our local receipts revenue has gone up, 30+%. It's gone up from about 11 million up to over 15 million.
Right.
That includes the recreation department, who's seen a huge spike in registrations. That's the fire chief's presentation from the last week's council meeting. There's a whole potpourri and salad bowl of stuff that's in that revenue source, but those are all municipally generated revenues. And while I'm here, it is extraordinarily important for the municipal employees, and they wrote a letter that you can see online. If you look at that, like my salary is actually offset by the fees that I generate in the administrator's office. The town clerk's salary is off, and those support staff are offset by small percentages by the revenues that come in.
I get that,
Superintendent
yeah.
has the same model. But if you look at that and you say, why has this gone up 7 million over those years, over year to year, it's really because the levy is 3.5 million or half of that, and then local receipts has really climbed up quite a bit since the pandemic.
So, okay. So to get your structural deficit, that's that 150 million operating budget less,
3.6 million.
well, that's the okay, less 3.6 million. So you have revenues from whatever other sources to come in.
Yep.
So
State
we're
aid,
looking at
yep.
3.6 million against 150 million budget.
That's right.
So whatever percentage that is. I'm just trying to follow it so I have
Yep,
some
yep.
sense,
You nailed it. Yeah.
history-wise or wherever to kind of get to it. Okay.
So if we didn't make up that revenue, right, that total operating budget, right, would then be 146.5 million.
Okay.
So you nailed it.
Okay, good. A lot of numbers, and I think maybe just one other observation, just in terms of common understanding. I know you probably obliged to do this for all kinds of regulatory reasons, and you have to present it a certain sort of way. With all due respect, you guys live this stuff, so you know it. Most people have no clue. It takes a long time to kind of figure out what you mean, what you don't mean. Perfect answer when you said yes, but maybe you know, like what the budget is. It might help, I'm sure it would help, if you were to kind of blow this up to broader categories of expenses. You kind of break it out by all departments and so forth, but for Franklin, we have X number of employees, we pay them X amount. Their health insurance is included in that, that's going up X number of percent. Just so people have a better walking around understanding of why the costs are going up, where the money's going. And they kind of look at that historically from the average guy's point of view, going up $5, $6, $7 million a year. Where are we going to be in 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? It's going to keep going. I mean, we've been here 26 years. I flipped through just for fun some of my old real estate tax bills. We're paying a lot more money. I just paid my natural gas bill the other day. Couldn't believe it. You know, with this 27% surcharge that they have there. I know you all know this. I know you all know that we're struggling to try to sort of keep up with all this. But just, if I could say it respectfully, I would say that you might have some blind spots around how people perceive what you're doing. All the best intention in the world, but people are not hearing you. There needs to be a better way to persuade people of what the problem is. Explanation, but maybe not as granular as this, because you kind of get lost. So maybe give some thought to a higher level, more simplified way to kind of explain it to folks. I think it might help. And I have to say, I was there through a lot of meetings last year with the override and that whole contentious issue and how that went. There is a question of trust. This is better that you're doing this. But again, I would say you're coming at it with, of course we got to do an override. Of course we got to do an override. I was at the meeting after last year's override failed, and everybody said, well, can we vote in 2 months for another override? It's like you're a hammer and everything's a nail, right? So override, override, override. Have you given thought to other ways to get money, to raise revenue? You need to tell people that you've done that. You need to think about what you could have done other than raise taxes, because that's how people are going to look at it. We have a lot of empty property now. We're closing a couple of schools. There's plans of police stations, early childhood development center, all kinds of swapping around. Have you thought about selling 1 or 2 of those properties? Maybe you have. Maybe you have a number of what that's worth. Would that settle half the override, pay for 2 or 3 years worth of overrides? I think you need to explain to people that you've given some thought to other revenue sources and explain why it makes sense. Maybe leave it up to the town to kind of weigh in and vote or give some ideas. But all I'm hearing is override, override, or we cut the police department and we don't get the 3rd ambulance. It's the same game of draconian cuts, or give us your money or we cut all these services. Think about it, tell us, report out, ask for ideas, suggestions. I think that would go a long way to help and communicate.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's kind of what we're trying to do. Sure, go ahead, Jim.
Steve, you can sit. You don't need to. I just want to respond to one piece that you mentioned. I think when I started here 10 years ago, the average property value in Franklin, based on the tax rate, was about $377,000. Today, it's almost $700,000. So when people see their tax bills go up, understand, I speak for everybody on the board and all the staff, we understand that as a part of that, you pay more. But I just do want to make sure it's not this endless tax and spend concept, not that you were presenting it that way, but I think to your point about speaking to the folks at home, the land values in this town have absolutely skyrocketed in the last 10 years. The last 5 years, the pandemic obviously accelerated at another level, but even before that, Franklin was becoming, if it wasn't already, an extraordinarily highly desirable community for a lot of reasons. And I think that is unquestionably a major reason why people's property tax bills have gone, a lot up. There's a double-edged, triple-edged, quadruple-edged sword on that, right? Some people who just bought into town bought at a really, really high rate. Some people have been living in town their whole life or whatever, have probably the greatest asset, an immense amount of equity in their property. So for different people, it obviously impacts them different ways and for different scenarios. But there's no question that the land values and the property values in this community have certainly contributed in most part to a lot of the big tax increases. And the last quick thing I'll say is, if you do take the time, and I sincerely hope anyone that's watching or listening takes the time, we will try to condense things down to a Cliff Notes version to try to make it as sensible for people as possible. I think it will help a lot. I have received endless amounts of feedback. My memos are too long. My charts are too long. I need to do more. I need to do less. But I can tell you, I have sucked blood from rocks for revenue. I've got a passport office. We've done the entire cannabis, program where that's brought in $400,000 to $500,000 in structural revenue in our operating budget every year. I know Lucas just revised, the school committee took a heroic vote on fees, which is very unpopular. The whole town council just did a review of 8-year review of the fee structure for developers and, a whole bunch of other ways. The reason why I say this is not to belabor or be defensive. One of the reasons why I say it is, I think people do need that information, like you said. I think it's a really good point. But as we go forward the next few months, I will resort to a comment that Councilor Hamlin made that's now becoming one of my favorite stories at a recent meeting, where people talked about, we don't know what's in the school budget. We don't know what's in the school budget. Where are the line items? We don't know where they are. And there's a lot of talk on social media about this. What's going on? Where's that? How do we get there? And people are just talking back and forth, but they're not really looking for anything. And I know it's a lot, but everything's keyword searchable. All of our documents are very transparent. And Councilor Hamlin made remarks at a meeting a couple months ago where she finally decided, I'm going to go look for what people are talking about. And miraculously, she found the budget right there on the school committee website.
It was miraculous.
Line item by line item, dollar for dollar, salary for salary. We also, as a pitch, we have an annual report, and I want to commend Lucas that we don't get to talk about this much. I proposed a couple of years ago to break out in the annual report, not just base salary for our employees, but also overtime, details, stipends. That can make some people feel a little vulnerable, but I commend him. When the town clerk and I went to do this as part of the annual report, which she does back there, they went and said, absolutely. So when we talk about transparency, sometimes I do get a little defensive, but I also just try to educate people, and your questions were really wonderful. And I'm saying all this for a few minutes because I think it's an opportunity for folks watching at home and folks here, but all of you in this room need to tell your friend and your family of where all these materials are, to just try to poke around. And I think everybody will learn something. There is a two-way street to this. I wish I was Luke Skywalker and I could Jedi mind trick the information out. But it is all here online. People ask me all the time, well, where was the money going to go last year in the override? It's one slide right here on the website. How much was this going to cost me? I didn't know. No one told me how much money the override was going to cost me in my house last year. I'm looking right at it. It was a half a page. So, Steve, you were attending a lot of the meetings, and this isn't, my answers aren't really directed to you. They're really directed to the people that are here in the room, that are extremely busy, that are short on time. We get that. The superintendent, the school committee, the council, my finance team, his finance team, we try to repackage these things as many ways as we can to try to get that word out. But I encourage the advocates and the citizens that are out there, spend some time on this, a little bit. It really does make a difference, and I think the conversations I've had one-on-one when I sit down with families, parents, or everybody, and I show them, and they go, oh, wow, I had no idea that was right there. And that's the idea behind this budget site this year, is to have a one-stop shop so all that information is there. And I really do appreciate your feedback and your comments. I think you are spot on, and we will do the best we can to try to condense that stuff.
And I would just add, without belaboring the point, as much as you try and as much as the intent is good with the detail, and it's searchable if you do it, you need to say it again
Yeah.
and again
Yeah.
in different ways, because you know how people are, they're like, you don't know how to do it. And it's just a fact of life,
Yeah.
right? And it's a complicated topic, so the more of that you can do, the more simple you can do in conjunction with this would help. The other thing with respect to how much is it's gonna cost, like the no side last year, like the big debate on, if you're gonna continue, could you come to the mic so everybody
Well,
else
just-
can hear, please? That's all.
We'll just let it finish. Yeah.
They had a calculator that included all of the added costs for all of the tax rate for the override and all the other costs that are coming in. I think that'd be good transparency.
That's a great point on that last one.
Just
Lucas?
And I'm not belaboring it either. I think you bring up a really good, first off, I want to say to you and to everyone who's come to the mic, I appreciate the tone and tenor of the comments, the feedback, and the questions. It's not, doesn't go unnoticed to me. I think it's, everyone brought up valid points. Whether everyone agrees or not, I just wanted to say I think it sets for a more productive conversation in a meeting and allows people the space to have varying opinions on this stuff. So thank you for everyone who's participated tonight. We also can get in the weeds from time to time. And, some of that's in a matter of because we've been asked to show that level of detail. But to your point, the broader, hopefully we are trying to build transparency year after year so that if people want to go and find those types of things. One thing, someone asked what do superintendents do? We're also graphic organizers. I worked on this today. But basically, we're trying to come up with a trifold type document that's basically like, now that the budget's been approved, what's in it, what's included, what's the impact, and why is it important? And just trying to, and then the QR code to the real detailed information and the website, obviously. So I think maybe, we can work together to think about the high level kind of, we heard through the reorganization, you have 86 slides, presentations, line items. What's really just going on the nuts and bolts? So we're trying to put together like a 10-page flip book that just like, walk me through it. I don't need to go through dig deep into every slide deck and thing. If someone wants that, that's all there. I think that's what we use as our primary source, but ultimately we're trying to elevate some of that information. That was actually really good feedback.
Thank you, Lucas. Steve, name and address.
Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia Drive, Community Information Director for Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the listening sessions. A couple of points of historical perspective to add to the information, since this is part of the series, so it'll be part of the record. The long-range financial plan, which is on Jamie's target. People may not remember, but back in 2007, we did have the one override that was successful. 2008, we tried again and it failed. 2010, we tried again and it failed. From that, the Long-Range Financial Planning Committee was put together. That was the first 5-year financial plan, and from my understanding, it's been done yearly since then. So they have learned over time, and we continue to need that going forward, obviously, because the key piece, obviously, is the structural deficit, and it's a 1-year budget issue now. It's not going away. We know there's other pressures, whether it's Tri-County, the police station, Remington, Jefferson. There's other pieces that are coming. To a plug for the master plan, which helps us as Franklin determine what we want to be when we grow up, if we ever grow up. 2028 is our 250th anniversary. It's not that far away. What will we really be then? Will we still talking about failing to fund our schools, or will we be in a better position? From the master plan, a data point to help the conversation. They had a statistics and details, obviously, in the master plan. The details there, 290-page book, but is great info, and then 40 action items. 20% of the owners of a house in Franklin are living on the edge to the extent that, and if you go apply for a mortgage, many of us have one done once in a while, once upon a time, maybe more times, they want to have your mortgage less than 30% of your income. All right, so hold that thought. 20% of the owners today have household income requirements between 30 and 49%. Household owners today. So they're on the edge. One major accident, one major illness, they're on the edge. That's why there's some financial issues. Rental side, 25% have a 50% or more. They're even more on the edge. So that is the financial reality. All of us, we're all Franklin. Some of our neighbors are in that category. Some of us may be in that category. So yes, we do need to fund the services, because, oh, by the way, if we don't fund the services, who's going to be the ones who need them the most? Perhaps those who can't afford it. The other piece, Chapter 70 and the hold harmless. The state effectively is telling us that we need to put that hold harmless money in the budget, and we can't do it all at once, but that would be a bogey to look at
for 2 or 3 times, food for thought. And I know the FinCom is looking at, can we do something in the meantime to help kind of fund that? Because heaven forbid that money goes away, we're in real problems. So thank you for all you do. Thank you to the TV studio for broadcasting this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Oh, she's the reporter. Is there anyone else that has a question or a comment? Please, Paula. Name and address, please.
Okay. Paula Lombardi, 757 Washington Street. I'm wondering, maybe you mentioned at the beginning, I'm not sure, but what we're seeing in the news and on television, that the utility rates are going up. Additional, 15, 25%. Is that figured into your current budget? I know it's only been this week, I believe they've featured it.
You mean the utility rates for the town facilities,
Yeah.
Paula, or for
Yeah.
residents?
For the town
For town buildings,
facilities,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, it is factored in. And the good news is that a couple of years ago, we were able to secure stable pricing on particularly our electricity rate. So we had a 4-year contract, which I immensely prioritized. Even at the time, our rate is about 14 cents per kilowatt, which is still very, very good compared to what a basic rate of National Grid would be. And we entered into a 4-year contract. And the reason why I did that is the most important thing to me on this volatile market was having a 4-year contract that we could stabilize pricing so that the pricing would not be susceptible to the ebbs and flows of the marketplace, which, as you know, is extraordinarily disruptive right now.
Right.
It has been for a while. As everybody hopefully knows in the room, you can go to our town website. If you're talking about your residential rate, for people that may be asking, you've had a very, very secure rate over the last 5 years because of a municipal aggregation program that the town council offered, and we went out to bid 5 years ago. During those huge spikes, the rates were 10 cents per kilowatt for residents and 15 cents per kilowatt for residents. If we had not had that in place for the last 5 years, ratepayers for electric rates at home, residents, would have seen probably $15 million worth of increases cumulatively around town. So I just want everybody to know that's been a huge victory for stabilizing over the inflation era. We've now settled out in inflation at least a little bit, but our gas, propane, electricity, and our other utility rates in our budget have been factored in, and those are very stable rates that we've not had to have huge increases, particularly in the facilities line item, which I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. 3 years ago when we were seeing inflation at 12% or whatever, the facilities budget, as all of you remember, went up almost $1 million just from inflationary spikes alone, just on utilities. So we've been able to stabilize that out, and that is represented in this budget model.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question, and it's on the federal grant, whether the interceptor that is now being built, now the new administration is putting a hold on a lot of grants and everything out there. What impact would that have if it's on hold, or where would you take it out of?
So that's a great question. So the Beaver Street Interceptor project, which is the project in town that has started construction. This summer there'll be some roadblocks, certainly on 140. It was a $35 million project that has no relationship to the federal government at all. So the federal executive order by the president has absolutely no impact on that. That project is right now slightly under budget. It is on time, and we expect it to be completed in 2 more years. The sewer rates to pay for that have already been approved by the council. That is already well in motion. We're 2-3 years into that. That was a state subsidized project at a 1.5% interest rate. So the federal executive order by the president has absolutely no impact on that project.
Okay. And my last question would be, the budget, both school and the town, that you've put in for grants. And once again, the news media and everything, a lot of things are being held or stopped at this point. What portion in your budgets would that affect, I guess?
So initially, when that news broke, I think we were all very interested to say, ooh, wait a minute, what's happening? I'm looking at my team over there in the corner around special education, finance, and some of those grants. Fortunately, the big news that we were hearing that was breaking hasn't impacted some of the grants that we, I don't know that exact percentage right now for you of which grants, but as I know, and I'm looking over just to verify, do you want to just share a little bit and answer the question just specifically on any grants impacted? Any withheld?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not.
I just was confirming, but yes. So none are withheld at this point.
So just so, that's a great question, Paula. So,
At this time.
so federal grants on the municipal side of the budget, or federal revenues, the municipal budget does not receive any federal money, okay? So whatever's going on down in DC doesn't impact the municipal side of the budget at all. The second thing I'll say is grants, traditionally, I can't speak to all of this, I don't think this is 100% true for the schools, but it's very, very minor. But grants are what we call under the law special revenue accounts. So they can't, they're not actually a part of our budget. So the grants issues that are going on down in DC have no impact on the overall budget because that revenue does not come in there. Finally, I'll say regarding that issue, I sent my department heads an email the day of that executive order, full steam ahead. Because what people have to understand, what's being said in the newspaper or on TV is what you're thinking, understandably so, but all of our federal grants that we get money for the New Style Cleanup Project or Franklin Ridge, all of that money is already under contract, so they legally can't actually rescind it. And I think a few days later, some people you saw in the news, oh, this is illegal, a judge put in an order. But I did send out a memo, full steam ahead from my viewpoint. Don't listen to the news, because the only thing we can listen to, and I mean this very seriously on a big issue that a lot of people ask questions on, I have a contract with HUD or the EPA or the schools have a contract with some agency and we have a contract in place. We're just moving forward until that federal agency says, time out. Whatever's happening on TV, and I'm trying to create that image of a distance here, we're relating to the EPA on a grant. Well, we've heard everybody's gonna get fired at the EPA. But that doesn't really actually have any effect on the money that's already been appropriated by Congress that we're doing that work. So I did encourage our staff to look at any unspent money federally. I can also speak for the schools in the town on this one. This is exactly why the schools in town work so hard, and these folks down here, to spend every dollar of federal ARPA money and ESSER money early. Because we did actually have the foresight that November may or may not go the way some people want, and we didn't want to leave a penny out there for what's happening right now. Where if you didn't spend that money in another part of the country, that's actually what the executive order is about. They're going to go at unspent monies and say what wasn't spent, and they're going to try to get Congress to rescind those funds. We are not in that position, fortunately, because of the folks that you see up here.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions.
Thank you, Paula. Okay, are there any other questions? Any questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just popped up.
Hi, I'm Jess Solom. I live at 46 Dale Street. I have 2 kids, one in kindergarten, one in 4th grade. Very proud Parmenter family. So we know the structural deficit is $3.6 million, right? It cannot, it will not be solved only by the schools. We're one Franklin. It has to be solved by every single department. If the deficit is not solved by an override, we heard that we would lose 4 police officers and a 3rd ambulance, for example. No.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm getting there. Can you paint a picture of what else the entire town would be losing, department by department, position by position, if we don't solve the structural deficit with an override? Would it, for example, be a slice of every department equitably based on the percent to total budget? Like, what does that look like tangibly? Maybe you can't answer that now, but think, if we're thinking about an override question, to say, no, I don't want an override, here's what I know we will be losing as a town, would be very helpful.
2 points. March 5th will be, so I don't know, I conceptually have the idea now. I mean, I know the budget numbers pretty well, but on March 5th, I'll lay out some of those scenarios. And what I'm going to do is lay out essentially 3 budget models. One with the model that you see generally here. There'll be updates to this for sure based on information we've gotten. And those will all be, like I've done, they'll all be laid out with what changed from this budget model to the March 5th one. There'll be option A, option B, and option C to try to illustrate that. One of the things I know Lucas and I have talked about on many, many occasions, pretty much every time we meet, one of the things that I would hope wouldn't come from this is the idea that, well, what's the percentage of schools, what's the percentage of town, and I am a little concerned about a debate coming out, and I know the superintendent is as well, as a potential issue that further divides the community in ways. So I would just encourage all the listeners and people here watching at home to read those models not as the defined, and I'll speak to this again in March, but while you ask the question, Jess, to not look at those models as that's it, set in stone, it's there, this is what's happening, let's fight over what they're doing and what's that is. But I want to be careful, and I know you and I have had many email exchanges, so I know you're not going to do that, and I appreciate the remarks about coming up and looking at this as a holistic town. Social media may do a whole different beast on this, right? And my favorite, which I don't participate in, so it's like I can pinata social media a little bit, but social media may not have that view. And I would just encourage the community, if we're truly one, getting into that debate about how to sliver it up and why this one more than that one, those are dangerous conversations to have. And I think to Chair Mercer's point earlier, and I think a couple of other folks, at some point we've got to, as a community, levitate up above that and also recognize that if an override is put on the ballot, pass, fail, just like last year, I'll point back to last June's meeting, we had another town council meeting, 2 of them as a matter of fact, in June and July, at which the superintendent and I know this and I can speak for him on this, we will be looking at where life is at that point. The House budget may come out by then, and the Senate budget, the state, there's other things that will come up. There may be other little slight cost mechanisms so I don't want the models on the 5th to be set in stone in the community. I just want to illustrate, to your question, at a high level, what would be at consequence if we don't fill that 3.6 or 7 million budget gap.
Yeah, I just think it would be helpful to know what we're up against and what we as an entire community would be losing.
Sure.
Again, not just coming from the schools.
Right.
So, thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee? Sure. Point that over towards.
Sorry, just really briefly. I certainly, it's already been spoken to, want to commend what I think was one of the most impressive displays of civic engagement that you'll find in any municipality today, and would encourage you to continue to bring others in, because I think the only, it was thrown out that there's this game that gets played with municipalities of threatening cuts and or asking for more money. I hope that those who show up recognize that this is in no way a game. This is a very measured approach to town finances in a community that has way punched above its weight in terms of the amount of services and the quality of services that we offer with the amount of funds that we have. And just like every other municipality, costs are rising faster than we're able to keep up with, and that is increasingly difficult for a community that's already doing the most with very little. This will continue to be a measured conversation, but we need as many people in it as possible. Thanks to all of you who showed up. Bring a few friends next time.
Thank you, Kobe. Anyone else? Again, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight and who came out at our last session. We still have 4 more of these. next week, Wednesday night.
Senior
we're-
Center.
Seniors, we're at the Senior Center at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Please, bring 3 or 4 neighbors, bring 3 or 4 friends. Tell them to come and learn where their dollars are being spent, why we're in the situation that we're in. And just so everybody's clear, once again, today, as we sit here, we are faced with a $3.64 million structural deficit townwide. And that's the issue that we're facing as we move forward. Now, those numbers might change, as Jamie alluded to, a little bit here or there. But these are the questions and comments. We want people coming in asking us, why are we in this position? Well, that's what we're trying to do by these listening sessions, is to get that information to the community, to as much of the community as we possibly can. And the only way we can do that is if you bring friends and bring neighbors and spread the word, come, listen, and speak. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'm going to speak.